El Coronel Maravilla. Another excerpt from Itzel I, this time to commemorate the massacre in Tlatelolco of October 2nd, 1968. I'll turn then to my brother, an armorer just returned from Vietnam, as he continues to identify the bullet holes in the not yet plastic side panels of buildings, the strafing tears in the barks of trees, the gouge marks in the concrete or stone, the possible ricochets. And I'll tell him another story of those sitting ducks back there in the plaza, those two easy targets, one I'd already heard during the Olympics in Tavo's living room, where Basta and I will be invited, as Marie Claire works in her studio, to listen to a friend of his, a martial artist of great renown, a Houdini or Evel Knievel daredevil type really, whose public demonstrations will often enough place him in harm's way. Because cousin Octavio the doctor isn't just Tavo, but Octo el Pulpo, a.k.a. the octopus, sometimes even Doc Ock, because Mexicans love superheroes and crazy, even if half English nicknames, and Spider-Man among them. And there's no one doesn't know Tavo knows everyone that he's got a tentacle in every ocean, river, cove, and backwater, moves not just in the world of famous folk singers or self-educated officials in obscure towns who collect the history of their ancestors, but in that of comic book characters come to life, of escape artists and magicians, curanderas and brujos and spiritualist seances, charms sold in markets to make you love or stop loving, invisible or invincible, or so fast that, like this man, you will barely be seen as you move to catch a bullet in your hand, the way it's said the best Korean martial artist can do, or dive out of a plane while removing chains from your cape, only opening at the last minute into a parachute. And who knows where Tavo had found this guy, what bruja or curandero had first spoken in awe of his performances, what medium had called him a breath of the beyond, in what market hung next to what curative herbs, dried devilfish, or magic mushrooms Tavo had first seen displayed a photo of him in his bright superhero costume. But we'll know when Tavo speaks of him with both a twinkle in his eye and a grinning enthusiasm that he is not taken in by the hype. Yet the level of the man's physical achievements fascinates him, probably becomes the principal reason he and Marie Claire will have both their daughters enter the martial arts to become the first Westerners to be invited to train in a very prestigious and mysterious and true story Tibetan monastery. Something Mercedes will tell me long after I leave. Though it's not the man's martial prowess that will bring us there that Olympic evening, perhaps the very one we watched Czech dissident Vera Çaslavska win gold on the parallel bars, while this man speaks of her technique, but because he is also a paracaidista and member of an elite unit of the Mexican army, a capitán, I think, or maybe a teniente, even a coronel, though I doubt that last. And anything I think I remember of them could as easily have formed part of his stage name, El Coronel Maravilla, or some such. Though the story he'll tell, always I will remember that clearly, and how much he wants it heard. What Tavo will underline. This man had insisted he invite us when he heard we were in the student movement. And the man himself will emphasize how he hopes we will tell others. The usual request, that we get the word out. Then, after announcing in solemn tones that the army is in near rebellion, this man will look down at his hands and begin to cry. And it'll be a long time before he recovers as he continues to speak through his tears, as he recounts how in the plaza it was government snipers who started the shooting, who caused the soldiers of the regular army to return fire and to panic and to kill more than 100 of their own in their crossfire. And that This was what had done it. That crossfire was making them rebel and finding out. Not just that they'd killed their own, but that they'd been betrayed into killing them, and the students too, because they'd believed it was the students, the demonstrators, that the students were firing on them, that the students had set them up, lured them in, and why do that? Why plan that? And so disciplined, firing from the windows of those apartment buildings, so a proposito. The students had been meaning to massacre them. They were convinced it wasn't the other way around. They were just there to keep order, not to take any action. And we, Basta and I, we were students. We had to understand what had happened was not the army's doing. Not their army, not the regular army, not what they would have done. They'd been trapped, lied to, waylaid. They had believed they were under fire from the students. They'd been tricked into believing that. Truly, they had. We must believe him. They had. Because thinking the students had betrayed them, they'd betrayed the students, so they were doubly betrayed. All of them doubly betrayed, because it wasn't the students, it was their own, not their direct superiors. They hadn't known either. It was layered, this trick, but their own. Nor do I remember if this man will ever name it, know if he ever knew it, ever say it was the Presidential Guard under direct orders from President Gustavo Diaz Ordaz, the way his successor, Luis Echeverria, will declare. I just know how strongly that information decades later released from the U.S. National Security Archives will resonate with me when I hear it on NPR, so that I'll know I've heard it before. So maybe this man really will say it, will know to be just that specific. Though whatever he'll say, he'll mention for sure that it was some elite army unit and not his either. Going through more than once how the regular army, after behaving the way they had toward the students, starting with calling them traidores, traitors, hijos de la chingada, then acting accordingly, had then found out it was they themselves who had acted like cabrones, coyones, hijos de la puritita chingada, not hombres hechos y derechos, pero puros pendejos, pendejísimos, because they'd been fooled too. Even if it wasn't their officers, still the army itself, their institution, what gave them their identity, made them men, machos, hombres, duros pero justos, had betrayed them. And then there'll come the repeated question, the one they all were asking. How were they supposed to behave now? How were they supposed to hold their heads up, pendejos that they were after they'd shot down all those unarmed students, girls as young as their daughters and others too, workers, bystanders, street vendors, women as old as his señora madre, and their own. They'd killed so many of their own. How could un hermano del ejército, a fellow soldier, do that to them? How was that possible? And this man will repeat again his first words. The army was in near rebellion. So many soldiers in near rebellion. And that we had to tell the others, we had to. Even if nothing came of it, others had to know, had to understand, and that they were sorry and intended to do something about it, something, because they had been doubly betrayed. And he had asked Tavo to bring us there just so we would know, just in case. And he'll keep on crying. for a while. Then something will slowly change, and his swagger will return. Yes, we must do it. We have to. Like in La Revolución, we are compelled to rebel. What else is there? ¿Qué más da? He'll grin then. And though he'll continue to look directly at us the way so many good entertainers do before they enter their act, I'll see the moment his gaze widens out, becomes interior, as if imagining the character he has to become in order to begin. And the hairs on the back of my hands will stand upright then. And I'll feel a sharp, cold tingle in them, the way you do so often at the first sign of danger. Like what happens when you're driving and the truck coming toward you briefly crosses the center line. Does he feel too safe? I'll briefly think. Is the regard his martial arts community, his daredevil community, even Tavo and his curandero community have for him, the safety of the bright superhero suit he wears to showcase his abilities? Are they fooling him? Because there's something in how he speaks, how his machismo reasserts itself, that goes so far beyond the limits any of the students, any of the activists I'll ever know, even my perennially locked and loaded downstairs neighbor kept in jail 2 extra years because of his mouth, will ever set themselves, that I'll find myself leaning forward to say, please stop, please. Yet I won't do it. I'm too fascinated by the insights he's giving us, by the tantalizing act he's able to make me believe will follow, even as I notice how one by one the eyes of both Tavo and Sebastian will seek out mine. And then when we get home, I won't myself for the longest time be able to stop crying. And Basta will hold me and cry for a moment himself, though we will say nothing of what we will have seen in that last moment, nor will we mention it to Itzel or any of the others in the group we're in together when we later give his information to them, because we know that to say out loud that you believe someone doomed will always call that doom. To lay down the very curse you wish to avoid, but whose course you already know. That your words will make real what you most ardently wish could be sidestepped. And then there'll come the day that we are once more at Tavo's, and Marie Claire will be there, and Itzel, when Tavo will look at us and tell us this man has been killed in a helicopter crash. And we'll look from one to the other. Si, I will say, and I will look at Basta. Si, Basta will say, and he will look at Tavo. Si, Tavo will confirm, and he will look at me. And then we will all look down and away and say nothing more. And Tavo will not have to say that no one believes it to have been an accident. It will be the same look that passed between us that night. And only later will we tell the other 2 that we had known him doomed that very night. What I will tell my brother, too, as we walk between the bullet holes. No matter if you can catch bullets in your hand or swim to the surface after escaping the tightest of locked safes, climb the smoothest of glass building walls in your bare feet, or slip silently through the air, removing the chains from around your body, no matter how long and how comfortably you occupy that magical space between fact and fantasy, still. It won't take kryptonite to kill you. So that I'll imagine him always tumbling to the ground in a sparkling, bright Mexican wrestler-style superhero suit, the kind whose mask I'll buy a grandson years later on a trip back, no matter that I know that in his gray beret and dull camo he has been consumed by the flames. Even as Tavo tells us of the events held, the speeches made, the newly written corrido sung for him. And that will be the last we hear, except that Tavo and Marie Claire's first daughter will bear his name. And I'll tell his story more than once, the way I will here, and to my brother in the plaza and as we walk through the buildings, even of the way this macho military man broke down and cried that night at how his comrades in arms had felt doubly betrayed, and how he had to return to his swagger and doom himself with talk of revolution to overcome the bone-chilling effect of that feeling, and of the grief at how in turn they had betrayed themselves and each other. And my brother will lean against a wall in an obscure dark corner below the bullet holes and tell me that there's many a Vietnam vet has felt the same. And then he'll light a joint. While later, as we walk again, I'll assure my brother too how for all that man's last macho bluster, I will believe him. This man, this soldier, this crazy, accomplished, superhero costumed martial artist, even to the numbers, I will believe him. And that he said them, you have my assurance that he said them. That Olympic night in 1968. El 2 de octubre no se olvida. Gracias. Thank you. And for all my friends from 68, para los cuates del 68. Gracias.